Hello and welcome to Subtext. I had a couple minutes here, so I thought I might walk you through some of the more basic ideas of how to build a better story using subtext and all the different fun things you can do with it. Just to get started, total basic general idea. This is Muse. So this is the digital mentor, digital story consultant chatbot based on decades of narrative theory and also the last decade of my practical work helping out professional writers and amateur writers alike. And it's a really nice place just to get started if you have no idea. Like me, I'm just trying to show how subtext works. So I really have no idea for a story. I usually do a Western just because I like Westerns, but in this case, I was thinking like can you just a basic idea or a story about two brothers on a fishing trip. Uh, I know I want to write psychological thrillers. Uh, like to set it somewhere in Northern California. I don't know. Let's see. So this is the usual thing that you're probably used to if you've ever used any kind of AI thing. All right. But it's tied to a lot of narrative structure in the background. Wow. Okay. So there's a lot more here than I would have expected. There's been some updates to some of the API stuff. So we'll just take this and I'll just develop it out. It's probably not going to be original, but at least it's something. So I just wanted to do psychological thriller. I just want an idea for that. So two brothers, Sam and Dean, embark on an annual fishing trip in the remote wilderness in Northern California. Sam is a successful businessman from the city. All right. While Dean, the younger, is a local who's never left their small hometown. All right. Like I said, it sounds fun. Their relationship is strained due to a dark secret from their past. Okay, cool. They killed somebody. No. As they journey deeper into the wilderness, they encounter a series of strange and unsettling events. That's very specific. Their fishing gear is mysteriously sabotaged. They find bizarre symbols carved into trees and hear eerie whispers. The brothers begin to suspect they are not alone. As tension escalates, the brothers are forced to confront their dark past. The psychological thriller element comes into play as it becomes clear that the strange occurrences are not just external threats, but are tied to the brothers' shared history. This is pretty cool. The wilderness becomes a psychological battleground where the brothers must confront their fears or risk losing their sanity. Climax involves a dramatic confrontation with their past. Okay, so this kind of thing. I just wanted like a basic paragraph. I didn't know it was going to give me all this stuff. So let's say that I love this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you. Take this idea and let me go into subtext. Okay. Like I said, this could probably take forever. So the difference between subtext, pretty much everything else, is that the structure is based on what it is you want to say with your story. So if you are, it's not just taking story ideas that have been done before and then, oh, okay, what's the most probable thing that would come up? Except maybe the idea that just showed up in Muse there. It's more about, okay, this is how I see the world, and I feel like when this is a problem, this is the way that you can solve it, and then I'll show you how to solve it. So in this case, these brothers have a past, and that it's coming back up to be some sort of psychological thriller coming back and coming to haunt them. Usually, for an example like this, I would just go into your stories here, and I would just add the most common story form. There's about 32,000 plus different story forms. But the idea that it came up with is super cool. So I kind of want to use something else. You can use a completely random story form. And these are based on ones that we have done either as a group or individually. Like if I see something personally, there's over 500 different story forms for all kinds of different genres, all kinds of different films, television shows, plays, novels, you name it, even this really awesome short story, One Day All This Will Be Yours by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It's a great story if you haven't read it. All kinds of different aspects of all kinds of different stories. So, and one of the things you can do is if I go into the storyteller's lexicon, so these are all the different terminologies, and you'll see genres here. So just for the sake of the example, I'm going to scroll all the way down to psychological thrillers. Okay, so we got Memento, Rebecca, Nightcrawler, X-Files. Memento's kind of cool. I was going to actually just jump right into Inception. But I'll tell you what, I will use Memento because I think it'd be a good example of a psychological thriller and how the story structure is separate from the storytelling. So this is the entire story form for Memento. It's missing some pictures here, but it breaks the entire thematic gestalt of what the story is all about into all these different story points, all these different story beats. Story points are thematic points in the story. Story beats are the temporal as you go through it. Like I said, there's a lot to learn here, but I'm just going to take the story form for Memento, which is basically telling the story about somebody who has, he's got short-term memory loss. He's got a disability. And I'm going to apply it to that story that I just had for this. So it's storytelling, but I'm going to actually use the story structure of Memento, and we'll see how that works out. So I'm going to build a story using Memento as a template. It's just asking me very specifically, the focus in the story is being aware of what's going on around you, being caught up in a diabolical plan. That sounds like I could use that in the psychological thriller. That's why I'm picking it. So I'll just build a new story. Okay. So what it's going to do, because this is already built, this should be rather quick. So it's taking that structure from Memento and just making just a random, it's not actually right in the story. It's just kind of getting all the story points and the story beats, the right kind of players that you need for it, and just creating the document for it so that then you can start to build the story. This one's instantaneous, so because it's already been done. So I'm going to jump into it. And let's see what we can do. I'm going to try and keep this relatively short. I might come back to it because it's actually kind of cool the way it's working out. Try not to edit too many things. All right, so this is that same story form. And you'll see all these different thematic story points. And these are all related to each other. So it's kind of this like holographic understanding of what the narrative is all about. And it's divided up into these 4 through lines. The objective story is the plot. Obviously, the main character is the person from whose perspective you are within. The obstacle character is somebody with an alternate point of view who is, by virtue of their very existence, challenges the main character to kind of grow out of their personal justifications. So these will be the 2 brothers. And then the relationship story doesn't always have to be, but is most often the relationship between these 2 people. So in this case, it's going to be siblings. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that'll be happening with these 2. And I haven't really done any kind of storytelling. Like if I go into the idea, it's not here at all. There's nothing there. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of work down. I'm just going to do the 4 through lines and show how we can take this basic idea and start to apply some structure to it. So life is ultimately meaningless until you apply some sort of structure to it, some sort of understanding, some sort of appreciation out of it. Like I said, I was going to use a default narrative for this. I'm using Memento just because I think it would be cooler based on what I've seen here already, kind of based on my experience. So I'm just going to take this setup. I'll take the whole thing because I don't think that'll be an issue. And I'm going to put it here in the story idea part. I'm going to get rid of these emojis. And I'll put the title bait and switch. Put that up here. And then I'll get rid of these. So at the top. So this is just the basic idea of what was just generated at the beginning. And the first thing I'm going to do, imagine you don't know anything about the 4 through lines, is to ask Subtext to teach me what it means to write a complete story. And the idea is that a complete story is one that addresses all those 4 through lines because they are essential to the way we understand conflict in the world. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and do this. I know specifically what I would like to see. Hopefully it works out that way with Sam and Dean here. But let's just go ahead and figure out or find out what Subtext thinks the 4 through lines of that story are. And what it'll do is it's going through, and it first generated the 2 pivotal players, which would be those main character and the obstacle character. And now it's using super advanced artificial intelligence to extract the 4 through lines from that idea. You can see here it's going through the 4 of them: objective story, main character, obstacle character, and relationship story, and adding a little bit more spice to it. It's taking the story form that I have of a Memento and using that as the narrative structure to understand how the story is supposed to turn out. And you'll see it's rather quick and just gives me a jump start on understanding the kind of story I want to write. It's not writing the actual story for me, it's providing the understanding of it so that I can write a story that at the end is like, whoa, that was really awesome. That really meant something, as opposed to something that's completely nonsense. All right, so what it did is it took that idea, it broke it down into the 4 through lines here, and then also went and summarized them into a blended understanding of it. Because this is what you would usually get, in a pitch or a synopsis or like a Netflix thing, like the little card that says what it is. It might be a little bit shorter than this, but let's see. Sam and Dean, 2 brothers with a strained relationship, embark on their annual fishing trip in the wilderness. As they journey deeper into the unknown, they encounter a series of strange and unsettling events. Their fishing gear is mysteriously sabotaged. They find bizarre symbols carved into trees, and they hear eerie whispers in the wind. All this sounds pretty familiar. The wilderness becomes a psychological background where their brothers must confront their fears and secrets or risk losing their sanity. Bobby Singer, a character from their past, emerges as the catalyst for the brothers' confrontation with their past. He's the physical entity in the wilderness that the brothers must confront, forcing Sam to face his guilt and the dark secret that has strained his relationship with Dean. Wow, this is totally not what I expected, but I'll go with it. The climax of the story involves a dramatic confrontation with their past, as Sam embarks on a personal journey of redemption, and the brothers must either overcome or be consumed by it. So it didn't really say whether or not, for me personally, psychological thriller. Sorry, because I have a brother. I would have had it end badly for the 2 brothers. But there really is there's no indication from the structure whether or not they're supposed to be together in the end. So then the 4 through lines, this would be the plot, which is the objective story, which is pretty much essentially what was in this thing here, the original, because it's really just doing plot. And that's, so when you use like AI and you create some plot, there's no main character, there's no emotion to it. That's why it feels kind of like, it's only telling like 1/4 of a story. So here we have the objective story plot, and then who did it pick for the main character? Sam, the older brother. Okay, cool, because I'm the older brother. Is a successful businessman from the city. I like that, although maybe in reality those are switched. He carries the weight of a dark secret, which strains his relationship. Okay. Basically, the only thing we know about him is he's guilty about something in the past. For a bit. Okay, so then the obstacle character is Bobby. See, I would have made the brother the obstacle character. Let's see. Bobby Singer, a character, emerges as the catalyst for the brothers' confrontation. He's the physical entity in the wilderness that the brothers must confront. All right. I'm just going to go with this for the example. I mean, I guess that is something different. I don't know. Is it a ghost? What is this? Bobby's presence forces Sam to face his guilt. Bobby's role is to provoke Sam's personal growth and push him towards redemption. Totally cool. Maybe he doesn't mean to do that. Maybe he just wants to terrorize him. But that would be his role in that. So in Memento, this is the Joey Pantoliano character, right? He's there. She knows the truth of everything, totally messing with him, getting him to grow. And then also, what's her name? From Matrix. she takes on a little bit of that, the kind of hand off the role from one to another. And then the relationship should be the brothers. Yeah. The heart of the story is the strained relationship between Sam and Dean, their shared history, and the dark secret that hangs over them. Creates tension and conflict as they navigate the strange occurrence in the wilderness. They're forced to confront their past. All right. That's kind of cool. Two things. One, usually when it does this breakdown, it is getting smarter. Sometimes it conflates, like most people do, main character with protagonist. They're not the same thing. The protagonist is something that exists in the objective story perspective. Main character is the point of view and emotional empathy, personal intimate baggage that the audience experiences. A lot of times they are the same person. So then that's when you get a hero, which it looks like they're doing here. Totally fine. The other way to conflate is putting the obstacle character with the antagonist, which is the same thing on the other side of hero, which would be a villain. So something like the Dark Knight, the Joker is both obstacle character and antagonist. That's why he comes across as a villain. As opposed to something else where the antagonist might be somebody who's in the objective story, who's the bad guy trying to make everything happen, but isn't necessarily providing that you and I are both alike sort of line. You're just like me, which is essentially who the obstacle character is. But their whole purpose of being there is to show them an external projection of themselves. So it looks like that's what it did here. Just for the example, I'll just let it sit here with Bobby. I think that's fine. Maybe he's already in the wilderness, not a ghost, but it's somebody that they know from the past, like in high school. So I'll keep it there, whether or not he's the antagonist or not. If I made him the antagonist, he will come across as like a twirling mustache villain, which maybe you can start to imagine. If I don't, and it's somebody else, which might actually be cool, like maybe one of the other brothers, maybe the younger brother is the antagonist. That would be excellent. So that's how you would break down those into just the very first step. And I've worked with people, one professional novelist for sure, who like, this is all he does, just breaks it down to these 4 through lines and then goes off and writes. Like, if you at least take your story and just get to this very first step, which is the basic thing, there's not even structure attached to this. It's really just looking at the different perspectives. You are going to be 80% ahead of the game. It's going to be so much better than everything else because there's something more meaningful being discussed in the story that we don't get in real life, which is being able to see both within and without ourselves. That's why stories are so powerful. So even if I just took this and just went off and started to write, 110,000%, like even just the conversation I was having in my head about who the antagonist would be and who the obstacle character would be and how maybe now it's the younger brother. That's super cool. And I guess what I'll do is I'll do a series of videos and go through this story. Because already I can see the timer here. I want this to go on too long, but really just to get you introduced into what that is. And then, okay, now teach me what an objective story plot looks like. And so when you click that, it'll go off and do the same thing and build out these different steps. So how the story begins, because of how it begins, what is the goal that then they are focused on? How does that get concluded? The different players, you can see that the younger brother isn't in here. It just has the 2 pivotal, Sam and Bobby Singer. And then from here, once you would build the plot, then you would go through those 2 pivotal characters' arcs, where they are at the beginning of the story and where they are at the end. So if you look at Memento, he has a disability in the beginning and he triples down on it at the end. Like maybe you could be my John G. That's what we would call a steadfast main character. They grow into their resolve. Whereas the opposite side is going to go from equity, keeping things balanced, which is kind of like what Joe Pantoliano is doing, to then kind of throwing things off, taking advantage of his disability. That's his growth. And I know it's out of order, but if you put it back into order, this is the growth from that beginning to the end. So that would be the same thing. So with Bobby, maybe Bobby's trying to keep the peace, and then at the end he becomes some sort of criminal because maybe I'm totally riffing. Maybe Sam has a capability for um, putting people to sleep permanently, and then he just grows into that ability. I'm just thinking like dark kind of psychological thriller sort of thing. And then again, like even just those three things, then you could go off and write, and you have this like amazing, cool story idea that has some sort of focus that is meaningful. Meaning, a lot of meaning here. You look at this entire schematic here, this story form. This is like a relational story form, a holistic form of what the entire story means. And there are parts of it in here that um, you might have seen. So like here's that ability problem for Leonard in Memento. This would also be Sam's problem. And so all these are kind of tied together. And these are the two most important ones. So this premise here is a distillation of all this into, or a reduction of it into like a single sentence. So hyper aware of others, and you can outdo a group. Okay, so this would be the character part. And it's just took a random illustration of this motivation towards awareness. So if you look at Memento, his steadfastness is always aware. Like he's got all the tattoos. It's like, oh, I can see this. I can see this part. I can see this part. He's completely focused on that. And that's kind of like what the story is examining underneath it all. And then the plot element of it that's related to that is this idea of conceptualizing, like how things fit together, manipulating people, which is what John G is doing to him, what Leonard's doing to himself, what they're doing with, I want to say Natalie's her name. And so these are all different ways of describing conceptualizing. And there's about 50 here in this drop down. There's like 50,000 more that in the background, the machine is constantly understanding what it means to have a motivation towards conceptualizing, to putting things together, outlining a plan of action, devising. These are all saying the same thing about conceptualizing. I like this. This is just a random one that it picked. And then hyper aware. So again, if I took that and put that together into a meaningful premise, it says, despite the difficulty, you can outdo a group through careful planning by staying hyper aware of others. So that's what the argument is of Memento, which is like, even though this is saying despite the difficulty, because the AI is trying to make it nice, but it's really, despite how bleak things get, you can outdo a group through careful planning and by staying aware of others. That's like Memento. It's not just difficult, it's actually like bleak and really bad for Leonard. But the AI always wants to make everything nice. Still working on it. But so in my story, bait and switch, despite how bleak things get, you can outdo a group through careful planning by staying hyper aware of others. So this fishing trip, Sam's gonna stay alive. I really feel like the younger brother is not going to be around at the end, by continually being vigilant about staying hyper aware of everything and what that means. And by the end of it, he's going to succeed. Him and maybe Bobby Singer will be, maybe they work together in the background to kind of put the brother away because he knew something he wasn't supposed to know. But he's going to end up emotionally in a bad place at the end of it. And all these have a meaningful sort of thing to them. So that's my introduction to Subtext. That's just 25 minutes of the very basic things. From there, that would be enough to actually probably go write it for most people, but you can also go into each through line, get into the depths of what's actually creating the conflict in it, go through and find out what's happening in each major plot point, what happens in each act, not only for the plot, but also for the main character and what Sam is going through, his personal journey, the obstacle character, how Bobby's, he's bringing up the past, how things are like he's constantly pushing on him in the same way that John G does in Memento. And then I didn't even talk about their relationship, the brothers. So, I mean, this is pretty cool, but the kind of misunderstandings they would have in their sibling rivalry or whatever that would then turn towards at the end, maybe learning the truth about what actually really happened and then how that would end up. So you would go through and illustrate how each of those through lines are carried through, um, from beginning to end. And then the weaving part is when you would actually make, if it's a novel, it's like it doesn't matter if it's like a novel or a play, it's all the same sort of structure. How you want to sequence it out. So if you're a fan of Hero's Journey or Save the Cat, or something, this is where you would put in that stuff because it's less about structure and more just about storytelling and presentation. You would add these different moments in here, like you would add a moment here. This could be a scene, this could be a sequence, add a couple different moments. And then all those beats that you had created or worked through up here in the illustrating section, you would then start to weave them through. These are like your 3x5 index cards, but they have meaning to them. Go through and weave through and build out your 4 different structural acts here to then be able to get to a place where you have your treatment that you could then download. I don't have anything written here, so that's why there's nothing here yet, which is devoid and stripped of all this structure and just has the storytelling. So it's like a blueprint, a meaningful outline that you can then take into whatever sort of favorite writing app you have to do the writing. Because right now, Subtext is not designed to do the writing in the app, nor is it designed to do the writing for you. It's designed to help you better understand what your story is about and help develop the meaningful moments within the narrative so that you can then give the audience something more than what they would get in their regular lives. So that's it for this brief introduction to Subtext and Subtext Muse. That's the little pop-up helper here, digital chatbot. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, happy storytelling, and I will see you next time.